This is, of course, a podcast about the Kansas City Chiefs, but they exist in the NFL and in an AFC with one division that's really shaken some things up over the last couple of weeks. And so, Seth, I just would like to get kind of a quick little elevator pitch, one sentence kind of scouting report from you regarding a few head coaches that I just have top of mind. The Steelers and Mike Tomlin have parted ways. In fact, the terminology is that Tomlin stepped down. When you think Mike Tomlin, what do you think?
Um, a lot of success in the league, some playoff struggles as of late. Maybe that, time comes for everyone. Every voice, even though they're the best leaders, might eventually grow stale in the locker room.
And that's, kind of the idea around John Harbaugh as well in Baltimore. They're obviously making a change. They had a whole big press conference today that was pretty interesting. John Harbaugh's time in Baltimore, how does that leave you?
Kind of a similar thing. He's a ton of success. Obviously, a good head coach and head coach material. He'll land a job somewhere immediately if he wants it. But again, eventually you can only have failure in certain ways for a certain amount of time before maybe it feels like maybe just things just aren't quite what you're looking for.
Yeah, an interesting thing to note, and when you're thinking about the Cleveland Browns, obviously Kevin Stefanski out there, it seems like he's also in line to get another head coaching job this offseason. Not as much success, but seems to be very highly regarded around the league, Stefanski.
Yeah, he's a guy that I guess I would just say a lot of the failures that have occurred in the Browns organization really centered around the failure with the quarterback situation, which wasn't on him. And I thought he got a fair amount out of the guys that could even remotely play quarterback. So he's a guy who belongs as at least an OC in the league and generally is a guy that I think has a good scheme overall and gets quite a bit out of his players.
And then I guess my last question for you, Seth, is how on earth is Zach Taylor the only head coach still in that division? How did that happen?
I don't know, but I'm pretty thankful for it.
I'm furious for no reason.
I have no idea what today's about to bring. I wonder if any Super Bowl champion has ever benched their left tackle in 2 different games in the same season.
Everywhere. Lights come on. I need to see it, Omar.
Someone is getting snaps.
Show it.
Jazz and I have been married for 17 years.
So, Nate, what did you think about...
What was that? That was brand new. I didn't know that was happening. Seth, did you know that was happening?
I did not know that was happening. I'm sorry, I'm going to hijack this for a moment. I look incredible compared to how I looked the last several years.
I would just say you look incredible, Seth. I think that's the only thing that really matters here. That is incredible work there. Yes. Is that a Tucker joint? Tucker, bring your audio in at least here. That was Claude.
That was a Claude joint. That was a Claude
joint. Shout out to Claude. We got an intro now for Only Weird Games.
He just doesn't miss. I am going to need to ask him, can we do Skinny Me, or are we still
you guys got to do an in-person podcast again. That's what's going to have to happen. That's just going to have to happen.
No, that was so cool. We didn't know that was going to happen. That was so neat. Claude does such a great job. We're just blessed beyond measure with the people that make this work. Not necessarily me, but Tucker and Claude and Josh really try to make this show work. And then Nate and I kind of see what we can do to kind of mess up that, which is fun. And it kind of it adds to the energy and makes everyone's life a lot harder. But it's really cool, seeing Claude, anytime there's a short that I see tweeted out, I am always come on, man, because there's often me putting my foot in my mouth or something to that effect. And so they just don't miss. No one involved in Only Weird Games misses except me and Nate.
I miss plenty, but that's by comparison and whatnot. I'm no sharpshooter. Sometimes I sit in the corner and 3-and-D. That's the way to do it. That is delightful. Thank you, Claude, for putting in the effort on that one. If you didn't see it, if you just heard it, it's a good reason to at least come over and watch the first few minutes of the show over on the KCSN YouTube channel, where we live stream the show twice a week as ever. I am deeply tickled by the intro there, and less tickled by a couple of the things that we'll talk about over the course of today's show. I feel like we went from such an emotional high, and we're going to get into some frustrating lows of this 2025 season, and a tiny bit of an update for you on the coaching front. It is, of course, just Seth Keysor and Joshua Brisco with you here today. Nate Taylor will be back in the mix, and I assume we'll get the intro treatment, and we'll be very excited by that next time around. But Seth, I would say we get right into it. It's been 5 minutes. I feel like that's a normal time for a podcast to get revving. I wanted to get to a little bit of coordinator news and notes, and ultimately, I thought that would be a lead-off topic for us today, regardless of if there was any real news there. No news, no official interviews, no reports of any official conversations surrounding the Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator job. I can't say vacancy, though, so I'm going to circle back on that. And interesting to note, though, that Mike Kafka has interviewed or will interview for the Buccaneers and Lions offensive coordinator jobs. Again, no connections to the Chiefs right now. One thing that we'll talk about with Nate whenever he's around next, or if we get any more news over these next few days, Andy Reid last Monday in his kind of end-of-season Zoom, he mentioned that in-person interviews wouldn't happen till January 19th, and I don't know what the official cutoff is here, but because Matt Nagy appears to be on track to take another job somewhere else, I think as of this conversation right now, Matt Nagy is literally the Chiefs offensive coordinator. Like, that he is on the staff and under contract, right? It doesn't disappear as soon as you're eliminated from playoff contention. Like, it does run through a date, is my understanding. The lab guys talked about that a little bit last night, and I do think it's a good thing to keep in mind, where if Matt Nagy gets another job locked up somewhere, maybe the floodgates open. If we get past the deadline and Nagy is truly a free agent and the Chiefs have an actual vacancy and we get some sort of, thank you, Matt graphic that goes out on the social media account, I would expect to see interviews from that point forward. So no news to report right now, but what's the vibe for you right now, Seth, on the offensive coordinator front?
Knowing that what's going on with Matt Nagy, that he's likely under contract, I think I saw through the 19th, but I whatever. There's some date there that makes it obvious. That
was
makes
also
me
the
feel
date that Andy put out for in-person stuff. So
Right.
19th feels like a reasonable line to draw right now.
And that makes me feel a little better about the lack of news. Also, the fact that the Chiefs think it's, important to keep things like that locked down for reasons. And so it makes me feel a little better than I had felt about the lack of news, because it is hard when, like, the minute Mike McDaniel's on the market, the Lions are like, come in here and interview for our offensive coordinator, which is a great move by Dan Campbell. Like, that is the way to go, because the only way you're going to lure a guy that's going to have some head coaching interviews is to show a ton of aggression towards getting him and offer him a lot of money. That's just how it's going to be. And so there are some kind of hot commodity offensive coordinators out there. Like, whereas like last year, so like Ben Johnson was like a head coaching candidate, hot name, right? So I feel better, but it is tough watching other teams be so aggressive and like out there with the news, but then you don't really hear anything. So that makes me feel a little bit better knowing that, there's a deadline there, and makes me feel less like, well, the Chiefs aren't putting anything out there because they've already made up their mind on who they want. So I'm antsy, because this feels like a decision that doesn't just, I don't feel like it's just about who the offensive coordinator is. Even if that's literally what it's about. I tend to, I've got this maybe toxic, I'm looking into it, habit of looking at everything as evidence of a root issue, like a larger underlying or overlying issue, depending on, how you view it. Now, the problem with that is not everything's like that, right? Sometimes a spade is just a spade. Sometimes, someone, does something because they've had a bad day or because they whatever. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes things just happen. And it's not always this evidence of some deeper underlying problem. Sometimes, though, it is. And for me, it's not just about who's going to be the next offensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs. It's about, we fired a couple of guys, right? We're moving on from the offensive coordinator, almost certainly. And we've fired the wide receivers coach, and the running backs coach is... Did that get made official or not, or was that just still?
No. The only thing that has been reported by NFL reporter, frankly, at this point, is the Embry thing, and even that, his contract might have been up, because there's not been any. We haven't learned anything else there, and Todd Pinkston, the running backs coach, his name has been bounced around a bunch, but nothing. Again, maybe January 19th we're just gonna get 6 announcements all at once.
Right.
I don't know.
And that's just I just saw, the Twitterverse rumors float around. Sometimes they mean something, sometimes they don't. So that's the only reason I brought him up.
I mean, there was an account that had the Embry and the defensive assistant whose name escapes me at the moment, which I apologize for. And then those moves later were reported larger. I think that account also threw out Pinkston, but we're in like Ricky the dog territory on that level of like, I'm just kind of, I want to know, but I don't even know that bad.
Yeah. Do I say root weird?
Yeah, I mean, say like you're from Minnesota. Yeah.
Root. Oh, well,
What's the sweet drink that isn't alcoholic, but like a little kid might think it is alcoholic? What would you call that soda? Like A&W or Barks?
Oh, root beer.
Okay, that's different than how you were saying
root.
Yeah.
I actually, because I lived in the Kansas City general area, well, Missouri, but whatever. Like I was north near Cameron. Anyway, this doesn't matter. I don't know why I'm doing this. Again?
Oh, okay. I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm looking into it. Is also we can add that into the.
I want people to know that like I'm aware that maybe it's a bad trade. Maybe that's a bad trade. I got a lot to look into after this podcast.
Brett makes the point that this is the word that they really does cause me pause, but I don't.
How do you say that word?
It's so early in the show that I don't want to attack your phonics at the 12-minute mark. I need you engaged and locked in today.
Sure. Hey, someone asked if I've ever been to Lathrop. Yeah, we used to play them in basketball, like when I was like middle school type thing, because I was from Marble, and so we'd play like Lathrop, and man, that was a long time ago. Anyway, so what were we talking about?
Root beer.
Yeah, I say root weird. So for me, the root issue, I have to complete this thought. Because I've lived in North Dakota, then Minnesota, and the Kansas City area or Marble area, depending on where you're from and how close you are. My accent is weird sometimes because I have a very Minnesota accent. Sometimes I'll say bag instead of bag. And so basically I fit in nowhere. I have no home and I'm going to die alone one day. But
you're looking
with regards to the offensive coordinator position, it's not just about who it's going to be doing it. It's about, is there going to be, okay, we've moved on from a few coaches. Great. Who are you going to bring in? And not just who are you going to bring in, but why are you bringing them in? Are you bringing them in because they're people that you're familiar with? Or are you bringing them in because you really think, okay, I've seen them do something that I think adds to the room. What I mean by adds to the room, any position coach they hire would add to the room, okay? But do they add something new to the room? Do they add something to the room that Andrew Reid would not think of on his own? I don't want people that are just going to only execute Reid's vision. Now, obviously, that's the job as an offensive coordinator, as a running back coach, wide receiver coach, any offensive coach. Your job is to help execute Andy Reid's vision. For sure. But I also remember when they had like the best offense in the league year after year after year after year. And all you heard about was how the ideas come flying fast and loose and they'll take ideas from anywhere and implement them. That's awesome unless everyone in the room has all the same ideas. Right. When I used to be a member of a ministerial. Stay with me. I used to be a member of a ministerial when I was a campus pastor of the Nazarene Church here. You know what's fun?
Now, what does that mean, Seth, for the audience?
A pastor, but not one they trust enough to like actually have responsibilities.
Fantastic.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, but you speak well in public, so we'll let you do that. So it's fun being a ministerial is just a group of pastors, right? It's fun. It's most fun when you get like various... I want to have 3 different types of Lutherans, a Catholic, a couple different Baptists, a Seventh-day Adventist, a Nazarene, and, let's throw an Assemblies guy in there too, a couple of Pentecostals. Let's just trade some ideas and see what happens. Now, there's an end date to that eventually, but you
can't agree on what that end date is.
Yeah. That is some excellent Revelation humor. Oh, that was good stuff.
Thank you.
So it's one of those things where if you get all those voices in the room, but if you get like 10 different Nazarenes in the room, you're going to hear a lot of the same stuff. So no matter how much it's like, hey, let's really talk this through about the doctrine of entire sanctification. You're going to get all the same stuff over and over and over again. But man, let's just get in a KJV Baptist and see what he thinks. Why not? And so I want to have some actual new ideas enter the room and become a part of that conversation that I'm sure is happening. But that conversation can quickly become an echo chamber if you're not careful. So that's what these hires represent to me. Because if you bring in a new OC who maybe brings in a couple of his guys, that's good stuff. That private chat you just made was so funny. Holy cow.
What? No, don't worry about it.
That is, it's like a new direction. It's a sign that we recognize there's something systemic that went wrong. It wasn't just injuries, which, by the way, I've been charting like when injuries happened and what games and who was hurt when, like a madman, because they all coincided weird. It's probably something AI could have done. Anyway, don't just say it was just injuries. Don't just say you're tick off. Show us that you recognize that there was something systemic there that starts with you being in charge. And okay, we need some new voices. So this to me feels about more than just a search for a new guy to implement Andy's vision. I want someone who can shake things up a little bit. No, we don't need a completely new system, but man, we need some revamping. And that's why, with all due respect to Eric Bieniemy, that would feel like the least step forward for me. That would feel like the least step forward. Kafka would be the second least step forward for me, but because of the steps he's taken since then and because of the track they had him on, I would still be like, okay, I can live with that. But I would get most juiced about like a Kingsbury who brings in a couple of his own dudes, or someone from the McVay, or
Talked
Shanahan
about
tree.
Shieldhouse this week.
Yep. Who brings in a dude of two of their own, who brings in a couple extra guys. Let's change up the voices in the room. Like I said, you know what? Let's throw a KJV Baptist and I use the Message Assemblies pastor in the room and hash out some ideas and see if we can solve some 2,000-year-old dilemmas.
Right now, gun to your head, who is it?
Well, I'd probably agree with the KJV pastor the most, but
I mean the offensive coordinator.
Every now and then you serve one up to me that I'm just like, man, that was great.
I'll tell you what, Seth. This doesn't happen as often. That was a total airball by me. That was not an alley oop. I pulled up from 3. I left about a foot off the ball there, and then you just came through with the windmill, which means that I got cut off guard, which is, I think, a bonus for you.
It's so rare that I catch you off guard. So I think, honestly, if I were
KJV EB, you think?
I think it'll be Kafka.
Ooh, okay.
That's what I think is the most likely result here. But if they bring back Kafka, I would love for them to, give EB a call and say, why don't you come back too? Now, the problem is you're still not building out the room as much as you should, even though he's gone out, kind of done some of his own stuff, kind of learned some stuff under Ben Johnson. So that's great. Dayball has got some of his system now. Kafka's got notes from that. So that you are still doing something. It's not as much as I'd want, but bringing back both of them I would like, because I like what Bieniemy brings to the table in terms of, no, that's stupid. Like, you need someone who can say, no, that's stupid. And I don't know that they've had a no, that's stupid guy in the room. Honestly, that was like the running joke. I think Simmons used to write about this back when he wrote things, was like he could be worth $1 million a year to an NBA team just to be the guy that says, no, that's dumb.
Right.
And NFL teams could use that for sure. So that I think it'll probably be Kafka. I hope it's Shieldhouse or Kingsbury, someone who brings in this, or like call Stefanski, be like, hey bro, that's been really stressful the last few years. Do you want to come to, do you just need a break from all that? And like, why don't
we'll pay you like a head coach, but instead of Jackson Dart, you get Patrick Mahomes. Like,
let's just do something.
It feels like he's a New York fit. There's no news on that or anything.
Yeah, I think so too. So that's what I would love to see, is a brand new voice, because it would also show, I would love to see like Mike McDaniel and Andy Reid, 2 football psychopaths with totally different systems, try to blend that into a new thing that we haven't seen, because that would be really cool to watch. Like, so that's why I want it the most, because I want to see something new.
I do like your assistant coach point again, right? Or position coach point. Now, again, right now, the Chiefs, as reportedly, have 1 offensive position coach vacancy that, as things stand right now. So I don't know what it would be beyond that. But obviously, that New York staff is totally getting dissolved. If it is Kafka, hey man, who'd you work with there? Who you thought had some good ideas. You know, it's like Brian Dable isn't going to go build his own new staff top to bottom somewhere else. He's not getting the Harbaugh Stefanski treatment here or whatever, nor should he. But there would be a number of ways. I like the idea of these multiple new voices in the room, because I think what we've agreed on many times here is that you could be the offensive coordinator or literally, or Mike Tomlin could come in and be the offensive coordinator, and it's still Andy Reid's offense. It could be Mike McDaniel, it could be you, it could be anybody in the history, it could be Bill Walsh. It's Andy Reid's offense in Kansas City. So I think that the idea of more fresh voices is probably the most exciting thing. I don't know if we're gonna get that or not. We'll see if we have some more news as the schedule rolls on, but I guess it wouldn't surprise me now at this point if we end up having a very similar conversation or a shorter version of this conversation on Thursday, because I don't know that we're going to have difference-making news in these next couple of days. So,
Right.
well, let's take our time out here, and then we're going to come back and take the defensive side of the absolute unit of the story that you have published over in the Chief in the North newsletter. That's because a lot of things were frustrating, but I'm going to make you tell me the most frustrating things about the Chiefs' decisions in the 2025 season on defense after the break.
I'm Brett Goodwin, one of the owners of The Learning Tree. The Learning Tree is a neighborhood toy store in Prairie Village, Kansas. This has been here in this location since 2000s. And my husband, Alan, and I purchased the store in 2023. Alan and I grew up in families where we've always wanted to have a business together. Alan grew up, for instance, his parents had a jewelry store. I worked in a local toy store here in Prairie Village when I was growing up. When this opportunity happened in 2023, we knew right away we wanted to contact them and pursue the store. We wouldn't have been able to get the store without the team at Emprise Bank. From the day we contacted them, they knew what we needed to do, which was very helpful. I would absolutely recommend the team at Emprise Bank to anyone looking to secure a business. We worked with Emprise from day one. They were extremely helpful. They were always great resources. We talk to them frequently. They know the area. They're very friendly. We know who we're going to talk with, and they know what we need to do. We hope we'll see you at the Learning Tree.
Hey, what's happening, people? It is Benny Heiss, KCSN betting analyst. And while the Chiefs may not be in the playoffs, that doesn't mean there is not plenty of action to go around for the rest of you that are still crazy fans of the National Football League. And with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, it makes every playoff moment feel bigger. So whether you're looking at individual matchups in the wild card, or for a possible Super Bowl matchup, or for futures come postseason time, DraftKings has your back, and they also have your back with early exit protection. If the player in your eligible NFL prop goes down at any point in the first half, guess what? You can still get paid in cash. What an opportunity. What a way to be able to enjoy the playoffs and not worry about anybody that you include in those props going down, especially early on, and ruining the rest of all of your legs. So here's what you do. You download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, use the code KCSN, that is code KCSN, to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Remember, if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. New York, call 8778-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. Connecticut, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino in Kansas, wager tax pass-through may apply in Illinois. You must be 21 plus in most states, void in Ontario. Restrictions apply. Bet must win to receive bonus bets which expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. Limited time offer.
If you haven't read it yet, or you want to read along, you can do so over at the Chief in the North newsletter, mnchiefsfan.substack.com. This is not just about the defensive side of things. You went through and listed 472 frustrating things from the 2025 Chiefs season. You pared them down a little bit. We've combined some, and I'll tell you, Seth, just going through today and going, okay, what of the defensive ones do I want us to talk about? Knowing it's just going to be you and me. We're gonna really hammer. We're gonna get into the nitty gritty of this. I still ended up with a long list, and I don't know if we're gonna get to everything. I've combined some things. I've tried to tear them out a little bit. So let's just dive in and see how much runway we have here, because there are a lot just on the defensive side of the ball, and I think the defense was less frustrating than the offense this year. I didn't count up your line items, but I believe this is the shorter list, and it's still really frustrating.
Yes, I am ready for whatever order you want to talk about them in, because that was the thing, is I really tried to stick with things that I found baffling, not just things I disagreed with. So I was surprised with how many I had. And that's with like combining a few things too. And it's like, it's not just, it covers like a swath of things. It's about player acquisition, player development, and player usage. And you're just like, you don't even know where to start when you really look at it.
And what I want to do today is spend maybe a tiny bit, like, first thing is going to be the Shamari Connor, Trent McDuffie slot situation. We've talked about that now. I can add it to the list. We've gone 0 shows without talking about Trent McDuffie and Shamari Connor in the slot. We've covered that ground plenty, but it's also impossible to talk about the 2025 season without having that be a part of the conversation. And I kind of want to roll that into the Noel Williams, Christian Fulton thing. So we're talking about the cornerback position.
Right.
But those are really 3 different things, all just at the cornerback position. None of it really goes into the future because we don't know where some of these spots are going to be yet. I want to kind of take that, point it into the future, and then figure out where we might go from here. So anyway, we don't have to go through every single beat that you hit in the story. And again, in the story, you had to pare it down quite a bit. But let's start in the secondary there. Shamari Connor, after we talked about it a lot this offseason, because we had this last offseason, we saw plenty of this in 2024. We knew it wasn't the best place to put Shamari Connor, and we knew that Trent McDuffie was the best slot corner in football. And it happened all over again this season, and I don't understand why. And if you understood, I guess it wouldn't have made the list. But what did we learn there? Why did we get another year of Shamari Connor playing so many man slot cover corner snaps while Trent McDuffie was kept on the outside in those situations?
I think we learned once again, and maybe even solidified, that Steve Spagnuolo is one of, I think, the best defensive schematic minds I've ever seen. One of the best one-off game planners. That's one of my favorite phrases to describe him. I don't remember who I was listening to. They talked about Spags, like the idea of a one-off game plan, like taking what you do and knowing how to take it away and knowing how to make you play left-handed. That's what Belichick was so great at, before he kind of lost his fastball a little bit. Spags is great at that, but he also, we just discovered, he really can be a slave to his tendencies. He really does believe in his system to a fault. And that's
through a fault in this case.
Yeah, through a fault in this case. And that's, I think, the thing you learn there is that he's just, these guys, they're not unimpeachable. All of these guys know so much more about football than I will ever learn, or 100 me's could ever learn. But I know more about, practicing law than any of these guys, all of these guys know combined. But I make mistakes. Sometimes I'm just wrong. And that's with something that's a little less subjective at times. So I think we've just seen like a flaw in Spags' approach. And I think that flaw, and I think one reason it frustrates me and other Chiefs fans so much, is because it appears, I'm learning right now, that it's not just about the fruit of what we do. It's the root of why we do it. And from best I can tell, because if you only address the fruit, it's not going to matter. I think we've talked about this before. Maybe.
You also said root normal last time. I just wanted to call that out. It rhymed with fruit.
I like to keep you guessing. If you take a banana tree, you take off all the bananas, and you super glue a bunch, a bunch of apples to it. A month later, it's not going to be an apple tree anymore. You can fool people for a little bit, but if you've got a root problem, that's going to be an issue, because the root will always grow out into good fruit, bad fruit, whatever it is. If only there was someone who said something about that at some point 2,000 years ago.
It's already been very Christian today, so we're gonna have to put you on a pitch count.
You're gonna need to put me on a pitch count here. Put me on a time clock. But I think at the root of what you see with Spags and Andy is this belief in the system over players. And that's not all encompassing. Like, Spags has made a lot of exceptions to his overall system, I think, for Chris Jones. It seems like, or like he did for L'Jarius Sneed in 2023, letting him follow guys around more. But it seems like he almost needs like a bolt of lightning, because Sneed was unbelievable in 2023. Like fully healthy Snead, such a bummer what's happened with his health. But and then the arrival of Trent McDuffie, it really gave Spags like no choice. It's like, you got to weaponize this cornerback room because Jalen Watson came around and was good. Like that was like that draft, man. It was a bolt of lightning. Chris Jones, like it requires this incredible thing to change tendencies. And that's what I think we see too often with Spags and with Andy Reid, is they rely on their system over talent and even a specific kind of talent. And they really think if they've got someone who they think understands the system well enough. Someone said to me once when I was being interviewed for a job, he was like, I think I can take any attorney and teach them how to do this job. I'm more looking for like office fit. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I kind of understand where you're coming from, but also, like,
Right.
talent matters.
Right.
Like, and that's where I think you fall into that trap. And that's how I think you end up thinking that last year's disaster class with Shamari Connor in the slot would somehow play out different this year, because you really believe that your system will overcome everything. And at the end of the day, it can't. And as a result, Shamari Connor had a worse year than he should have. Trent McDuffie had a worse year than he should have. And there was a ripple effect throughout the defense. And so I think that's the thing you learn there is, yes, value your system, but also it can't be like a 90-10 thing. It's got to be like a 60-40 thing or something.
And this is kind of basic, I guess, but if you only have, let's say, 2 safeties who you actually enjoy putting on the football field, and you have, let's say, a pretty deep roster of cornerbacks who have earned some playing time, it would make sense to me, on a rudimentary level, it would make sense to say, well, let's do less 3 safety stuff, and let's go ahead and shuffle our corners into space here. Because, look, last year, a couple guys are about to catch a stray here probably, but like last year, when Najee Johnson, 2024, when Najee Johnson was having terrible days on the outside, I could hear the argument of like, okay, well, Shamari Connor in the box is a useful player, and that's not a great matchup, but you give me Connor in the slot so McDuffie can move outside, and that we're covering holes with Flex Seal here. We're just trying to make the best overall unit that we can. Sometimes your hand is forced that way.
Right.
The hand would have been forced, if that was true, the hand would have been forced the other direction in 2025, because you had Noel Williams. When he got his early glimpse, he looked really good. You had Christian Fulton, who was injured in training camp, and they gave real CB2 money to, and he got involved a little bit late-ish in the season, and it was terrible, and then he ended the season incredibly well, like to the extent we're talking about, instead of his dead cap hit, we're talking about what that means for retaining or not retaining Jalen Watson and Trent McDuffie. So as that ripple effect, you drop the stone in the water on Connor and McDuffie, the ripple effect is that you're playing Shamari Connor over, effectively, Noel Williams, or later on, Christian Fulton. What about those guys' usage jumped out to you as we're just stuck in the secondary here?
And that's where you end up with the same thing, where what's weird is like Connor, who again, I think is a perfectly fine box safety and brings some value to the table, even as a 2-deep guy, because he does have speed, he has closing ability, and he brings kind of a spark to the defense. He's kind of a playmaker, and you need that.
Yes.
But he also, like, he's not a slot corner. We already covered that. But he also had some blown coverages, as many as anyone on the team in terms of frequency. And yet he still played like 100% of snaps, whereas like Noel Williams starts to play well early, has a couple blown coverages, and then effectively gets benched after the Buffalo game. The most frustrating snap for me, like that really exemplified all this, is against Dallas. You got like a 3rd and 3 in the 4th quarter, and Dallas ran out a 3 wide receiver look. And the Chiefs, and this was after Brian Cook got hurt, but the Chiefs match with a 3 safety look instead of a 3 corner look, even though their best safety by kind of a country mile is hurt, so they got to march out Mike Edwards, and even though Noel Williams is healthy. So instead of having Trent McDuffie covering a receiver out of the slot, Shamari Connor, who loses and gives up the first down, and Mike Edwards can't get over on time because you just don't have the help there the same way you could. And Noel Williams isn't on the field. They matched. This is to me like the height of a certain kind of hubris and saying you don't know. And I would just say, just a response, Bleed Red Arrowhead says loyalty over best players in the field. It's not about loyalty. It's about hubris. It's not about, oh, gee golly, I just want this guy to succeed. That's not what it's about. These guys are killers. They want to win, okay? They trust their system and their analysis over everything else. And in that situation, they said to themselves, my system will win this. And that's where you could have had the height of hubris is matching a 3 wide receiver look with a 3 safety look, and then putting that guy who's been burned repeatedly in the slot from week 1, it started, putting him in man coverage against a shifty slot receiver in space. And it went exactly how you'd expect. The Noel Williams thing was another example of this, where, you know, you get on there a little bit, show you can do a little bit more, had a couple blown coverages against the Bills for sure. Well, then rather than saying, okay, let's run a little more mixed coverages where we're just going to tell Williams, hey, we obviously can't do everything we want to do with you, but we can trust you to lock down a guy in the boundary and make his life miserable. So yeah, we'll do a little, you know, a little variations of coverages where we play a little man on one side, play a little zone on the other. Instead, it's like, nope, he can't run the system. Get him off the field. And even in Dallas, where they desperately needed more strong coverage on the outside. And that's where everything, like with Christian Fulton, it felt like he had a few blown coverages, and he didn't play well against Tennessee. It looked bad. But also, I would just say that was his first significant action in weeks and weeks and weeks. And then as soon as he had a little bit of, you know, rust knocked off, he looked like the same guy he looked like the year before. So that's where it's kind of one of those, like, it's the same root issue among all those problems where you're trusting the system. Really, they really could have put themselves in a much better position to win games, especially if you're insisting on not playing Jaden Hicks because he's making mistakes. You don't expect
he's on the list.
Yep. Yeah. So okay, fine. You don't have 3 safeties that you love playing this year. Okay. So play 2 safeties and 3 corners. Because I personally think a cornerback trio of Noel Williams, how he played this year, even with some of the warts there, and you got to figure that stuff out. And then Trent McDuffie in the slot and Jalen Watson on the other side. That's a good group of corners.
It's a good trio.
It's a
very good.
It's a really good trio. And if you want to mix things up, Christian Fulton, once you saw he could do, you can do some things with that. You've got 4 players that can play, and that allows you to put McDuffie where he's one of the best players in the NFL. And instead, they just kept fiddling around. Well, we got to run these safety sets. We got to run 3 safety sets. And that's unfortunate. And that's where that became one of my 2 biggest baffling things as the year went along. And they are, like you said, they're all interconnected.
And I don't have the comments open right now because I've got enough screens pointing at me as it is. But I imagine that, you know, there are a couple of different lanes of, like, I don't know, 50 like half-hearted pushback that might be available. Part of it that's frustrating is, like, look, if it worked, then fine. If Christian Fulton never played this entire season all the way to the Super Bowl, you go, well, all right, you know, that was the Elijah Mitchell thing for a minute, or like Jalen Moore. I'm still not mad about the Jalen Moore contract because Josh Simmons was healthy and good, and Jawan Taylor was playing good football until he got hurt. And so if we never would have seen Jalen Moore, I wouldn't have been mad about Jalen Moore on January 13th because it was a fine process, and it's just how the roster played out. So let's make it about Jaden Hicks then for a second. Because we heard Spags late in the season say, you know, he's had more mistakes in year 2 than I was expecting him to have. And we've seen it. This is another instance where no one here is arguing that, frankly, that any of these guys had a perfect season. You mentioned, like, the Noel Williams drawbacks. The positives are much stronger. The thing that I think you're going to explain further here is that Shamari Connor's drawbacks exist. Nick Bolton's drawbacks exist. Those, by the way, were your top 2 snap getters in 2025 for the Chiefs defense. It was Shamari Connor with 1,022 and Nick Bolton with 1,012. Those are your top snap getters by a mile. I mean, obviously, positionally matters some, but Drew Tranquill and Jalen Watson were next, and they're in the 800s. So, and injuries, of course, play a factor. Those guys were out there. But Shamari Connor and Nick Bolton kind of exist as this just, like, borderline unquestionable duo of the defense of just, like, if you are literally 98 and 97% of the time respectively rolling into games that did not matter for the standings, 98 and 97% of the time if the Chiefs defense was out there, Shamari Connor and Nick Bolton were out there. Earlier in the season it was literally like 100% and 98%. There's no thought that their mistakes are so costly that you can't have them in certain situations. there are lots of conversations about Jaden Hicks's mistakes keeping him off the field, and his highlights, you can see the upside there. So, and that's, I know, a huge part of it. Where did the landing spot of Jaden Hicks for you, who, by the way, played 42% of the snaps? He got a little more work later in the season, not a lot more in those last 3 weeks, but certainly more than. Like, he played 5 snaps against the Chargers and 11 snaps the week before against the Texans, games that were like borderline elimination games.
Right.
4 snaps against Buffalo, 13 against Denver. I mean, he's a part-time player. This is a club in your golf bag, not a staple of the defense, which I think we expected him to be entering last season.
Yeah, Lev, one of our commenters here, who's here often, made a great point that it almost reminds you of it was like the Juan Thornhill system thing all over again. It was above that one.
I like him saying we built Daniel Sorensen in the aggregate. I don't even know if that adds up or not, but it's a very funny sentence.
It's a very funny sentence, but it was like Juan Thornhill, and if people remember, I mean, there was an entire season where Thornhill just could not get on the field in favor of Dan Sorensen, even though it was pretty clear Thornhill, and this was after Thornhill looked like he had a little bit more of his burst back. And so I don't doubt that Hicks was missing some assignments, but I also don't doubt that Shamari Connor was too. And that's where it's like, okay, well, it's like, but I'm sure the argument would be, well, yeah, but Shamari brings this, this, and this. But you could watch Jaden Hicks play, and so does he.
It seems like mental mistakes are punished 10 times more harshly than physical mistakes. This is my take that it's taken me 5 years to formulate.
I completely agree with that. If the player recognizes it but is too slow to get there, they seem to be like, oh man, way to trigger on it. We'll get it next time. I would also say that some of the mistakes Connor and Bolton make are mental. Like, Bolton tries to drop, but I think, Nate made a comment that I thought was actually really insightful when I was talking about Bolton always jumping routes. Not always. He at times jumps routes in a way that he can't afford to, because he just doesn't have the athleticism to do it. It puts him out of position. Occasionally he makes a big play with it. I feel like he's the one that has the answer. Like, well, I saw it on film, coach, and here's why I did it. Whereas if you don't have that answer, I think Spags is harsher on you. And so, like, certain kinds of
some logic to it, right? Like, your Steve
certainly
Spagnuolo, your defense is fundamentally and like at a core level, it has to be intricate. You have to have a big variety of things that you can show to opposing offenses. It is a defense built on variety and people being on the same page. The communication matters.
Yes,
but
exactly, and that's where it seems like the leash is so much longer for some than for others. And I understand there's going to be good reasons for that, but it feels so much longer. And that was the frustrating thing with Hicks, was seeing a guy who, when he's on the field, offers he offers a certain really physical skill set that is just really noticeable when he's out there, both in coverage and against the run. And so it's a frustrating thing to see. And that's where, again, with Shamari Connor, it was often mental mistakes that were his problem. And that's why it's like, it seems like for thee, but not for me. And that's just a little harder to explain. And so that whole stuff, that really was inexplicable the way it was handled. Even if I maybe know what Spags might say, it's not just that I disagree. It's that the results, like you'd said, they don't back it up. They don't back up the process. It becomes inexplicable when you repeatedly see the same thing happening. And you're just like, yeah, but that's just not, you're living in the theoretical, where what's really happening here is not this.
This is actually, I think, bleeding into a topic that you did write about that I don't want to spend a lot of time on today, because we've got several more concrete things. But like a bit of a snarky question that just popped to mind. Does playing time make you better? And if even aside from that, does playing time make you easier to evaluate? Because you talked about the Chiefs playing veterans late in the season and not playing the younger guys later in the season. Yeah. Does it matter for Jaden Hicks? Look, I know we're out here trying to win football games, and immediately I'm not arguing for hey, go 0-4 to start the year and it'll all be fine, even though the Chiefs did go 0-2 to start the year and it wasn't fine. But does Jaden Hicks benefit from playing 80% of the snaps the first quarter of the season and then seeing how he's picked up into year 2, or to what you're seeing from, because so much of you wrote about the idea of the practice evaluations, and by and large, teams know what they have, and by and large, Sunday isn't a huge outlier for what they expect from a given player.
Mm-hmm.
But it was for Esapole, and it has been at the safety and linebacker positions a few times over the years. That's a snarky, maybe rhetorical question of like, do young players get better with more playing time? If so, it's another reason to just put Jaden Hicks on the field until you're able to totally wash your hands. So you know what? Nope, we missed the draft pick. We put too much on his shoulders in 2025, and we got to strip it back down and start over. It feels like instead we're going to be we're in purgatory on quite a few players right now. It feels like.
I agree with that. And I do think playing time helps players get better and helps you evaluate because there's nothing like it.
Right.
Other than preseason games, that's the closest thing you can get to it. And obviously things aren't as complicated and that kind of stuff.
Especially the mental side.
Yep, especially the mental side. But like you can see them react to the speed of the game. You just don't get that. Like, I mean, there's a reason why we talk about, practices without pads just in shells don't really matter for evaluating. And then practices in pads matter a little more. And then the actual scrimmages, the 11-on-11s matter a little bit more. And it just keeps ramping up. And the best time to really learn how to get that muscle memory is going to be with some live game reps. Now, is that going to apply to everyone? No, some guys just got it. Some guys just don't. I get that. But it allows you an opportunity to see and develop as best you can. Now, are games for development? No. Can they help with development? Yes. So that's where it's a nuanced question for sure.
It's just, I don't know, something that pops to mind, and again, what feels like kind of a theme on some of these things. Not necessarily the case on this one. Let's talk about the defensive line. I think you ended up breaking this into 3 separate topics in the story, and so we can kind of partition it off however we want. I think the Nadi Pinnell piece of it has probably been the most sufficiently covered. It was hilariously, in retrospect, it was the opening topic of the first edition of Everything Else with Joshua Brisco. You can watch live on KC Sports Network Mondays and Fridays at noon, or wherever you get your podcast. But literally the first show, we were set up in this beautiful setup at the Majestic, and the show ended up being about Derek Nadi and Mike Pinnell. And that felt kind of crazy, but also kind of important at the time, because it was like, man, this is just kind of confusing process. You trade for Derek Nadi after letting him walk so you could bring Mike Pinnell back, treat him like a starting defensive tackle throughout training camp, which we talked about at the time, and then they end up trading Nadi back, cutting Pinnell. He signs with the Bengals. Later, he demands his ransom and gets out of there. What about that stuck with you as you revisited it 6 months later almost?
The baffling nature of the process. Like, okay, fine. If you had they even just let Pinnell walk and just kept Derek Nadi on, I would have disagreed, but I would have been able to say, okay, they think he's better.
Yep.
Okay, I disagree.
Younger, better, whatever.
Yeah, but whatever. The way they did it, like the way you just described, so I don't need to relitigate it. It just makes no sense. They clearly were caught off guard by something. And whatever it is they were caught off guard by, I'm still confused by, because they ended up going back and getting Pinnell anyway. The entire process there made zero sense to me. And when Pinnell came back, he wasn't like this huge difference maker, but I think he played better than Nadi did. Again. So the whole thing is just odd. That we covered so much in season that there's not a ton to add there. It was just odd. A weird way to handle things and a weird way to treat your defensive tackle position. It was almost like, well, you wouldn't even say that it was like, oh, they thought Omar Norman Lott was going to be, their one tech, because they still went and got another one tech.
Right.
Like the whole thing was bizarre to me. And I hated every second of it. And it cost them, I mean, it's a late round swap, but it's still something. It cost you something that it didn't need to cost you. And that's just, again, it's odd. Just odd.
It also cost you better defensive tackle play for the first half of the season. I mean, just because Pinnell did play better over that period of time. You mentioned Omar Norman Lott. Obviously, his season ends up ending with the ACL relatively early on. He was dealing with injuries throughout training camp and early, and there were reports, as you wrote about, the Chiefs were asking him to put on some weight and be able to play as a heavier player on the interior. What about the details of that stick out months removed, and remembering the selling point of him as a prospect and then
Correct.
The apparent plan for him as an NFL player?
And I think you are hitting the nail on the head with the second part there. A lot of people focus on the injuries, like, oh, well, they forced him to put on weight and now he's injured. Maybe, I don't know. Like, well, it was bad weight. We don't know that. We just don't.
And
like,
we don't know that being fat makes your ACL tear. Like, that's just
right.
The ankle stuff and all that through training camp. But like, I don't really have any interest in making his ligament tear. Patrick Mahomes is in pretty good shape, and his ACL tore anyway.
And yes, and so the issue there, I don't know, because again, we just don't know whether it was good weight or bad weight. I mean, like, you can look at him and be like, it looks like a lot of fat. I just don't know. These guys are much bigger than us. They're very different athletes than us. So, like, we always try to like superimpose. Like, I couldn't put on 20 pounds in 3 months.
Watching Trent Brown on Monday Night Football on the playoff game last night. Those all white Texans uniforms did not do him any favors. I was watching. Sorry, this is my diatribe. I went over to a friend's house because he's a Steelers fan. And we had a bunch of our friends over, none of whom really care about football, most of them. And one of the things was just like a shot of Trent Brown walking onto the field with other football players around him. And everyone was like, whoa, hold on, what's that guy? I was like, that guy is 6'8", 380 on Pro Football Reference, and I might take the over.
Yeah. No, that guy's massive. That dude.
They're big, and they move pretty well.
They're just different. They're just very different. But I think the biggest thing is you drafted a guy based on his ability to get after the passer. And then you immediately did something that probably isn't going to help him be better at getting after the passer. And especially when one of the ways he does it is his explosiveness. He's got a little bit of bend for a big dude, all that stuff. And then, well, no, we're going to have you put away. Like that process to me was odd, super odd. And I'm sure that they see something on film, and he does have heavy hands to where they're just like, oh, no, we really think he put on good weight with the way he's built. I don't know if I agree, honestly, but I don't know. But it's still just such an odd thing to bring him in, tout his pass rush ability, and people are like, oh, okay, I guess the vision is Tershawn Wharton with maybe a higher ceiling. Okay. But then you immediately try to turn him into a different player than Tershawn Wharton. Like, that makes no sense to me. So that was a wildly frustrating thing, especially when you didn't make many or any really other moves. So you're relying on this guy along with the guy picked right after him to contribute immediately.
Seth, I didn't really hear anything you said there, but I'd like to talk about how the Chiefs didn't really make a lot of other moves on the defensive line outside of Omar Norman, Lott, Nash, and Gelati. I'll tell you what, man, you do podcasts together with the same guy for like a decade, and eventually you figure it out. What about the pass rush plan? Not in the game-to-game sense, but in the team-building sense, it stood out.
I think that of all the decisions they made, this one's probably the most head-scratching. And I almost didn't include it because one could argue, and so I just wrote this, so I'm just gonna we now go to Seth Reed's things he wrote on the internet. Okay,
you've been going off the top of the head a lot today, so I feel like you're allowed one paragraph of reading.
Yeah, I almost didn't include it because one could argue the Chiefs, and like that's the thing, right? If you can argue it respectfully or even slightly, like, you know what I mean, then I didn't include it. If you could like at least give a viable reason, somewhat. The Chiefs, maybe you could argue the Chiefs banked on Karlaftis taking another step forward. Which he's done every year, taking small steps forward as a pro. And they were counting on Charles Omenihu being the 2023 version of himself. Mike Dana being better than he was in 2024. And the rookie class helping. And maybe not losing too much steam from Tershawn Wharton. Here's my problem with that. That's a lot of different things you're counting on breaking your way in the NFL. And like, oh, sure, a multi-year vet will take another step. And another dude who wasn't himself last year will definitely be back to his best form. And another guy who's been okay at best will remain at that level and maybe improve a little from what he did last year, especially as a pass rusher. And our rookies will be able to contribute right away. And Tershawn Wharton being lost won't hurt anything.
We'll get 80% of Tershawn Wharton out of Jerry Tillery.
Yeah. And that's and I wrote about Tillery, like, oh, on film you can see some stuff there. And Tillery actually I thought was fine overall. And so
most of those bets are individually defendable. It's a bad parlay.
Yes, that's such a great way of framing it. When you are thinking, it's one thing to like hope that one coin flip goes your way. It's another thing to hope that 5 of them go your way, because that just is not usually how life works. And I would call each of those decisions a coin flip. And that's where the other thing that I think they were just counting on was that nothing could affect Chris Jones, that he was just, because nothing has for years and years, that it's always going to be a certain kind of, way for him. And this year, although by the end of the season, if you look at like Brandon Thornton's stats and you look at some of the more advanced things, Chris Jones ended up being elite regardless. But for a while, especially early in the season, it was tougher. It was tough sledding. And so they bet on all these things to happen. And that was all of their bets were coin flips at best. To me, the fact that you didn't like try one thing that was a little more like, well, we think this guy, like, especially when you look at like, well, Seth, they didn't have the money. They had the money to pay Christian Fulton. And it's just a little tough there to swallow that lack of activity and then counting on rookies to fill it out. Now, Ashton Gelati, I thought, had a perfectly fine rookie season. I'm excited to review his film in the coming months. And maybe, like, my guess is I'll probably try to do like 6 to 8 games throughout the course of the year, get a good idea. But like, and maybe Norman Lott would have blown things up down the stretch, but it's a lot of bets. And they ran back a pass rush that was legitimately a problem last year. And that's to me where the problem really lies, is it's something that you should have seen coming. It's like playing Shamari Connor in the slot. You should have seen that coming. It was obvious. So that's where it's frustrating for me. They had a pass rush. They've gotten away with it in certain years, like 2023, because the secondary was so good and Chris Jones is unbelievable. And they just kept barely skirting the line year after year after year after year as a pass rush team. And you keep running that same stuff back. And it really bit them this year.
I was just curious. I went and looked, and obviously a lot of these were dealing with injuries at the time, so I don't know if these are worthwhile snaps, but Omar Norman Lott had 73 snaps before he was ultimately lost for the year. I might advocate a little bit for a bonus Omar Norman Lott section in your Ashton Gelati review, because like I don't know, and here's the thing, it might not matter. He might come back. He might come back at a different weight. He might come back playing a different type of defensive tackle position. He might come back worse off because he's recovering from a serious knee injury as a defensive lineman. So I don't know if that's ultimately worth your time. Even if it's not a full on charting or whatever, I'd like to have the note card of what am I comfortable expecting from Omar Norman Lott next year, because it's going to impact what the Chiefs do. It shouldn't impact if you draft a defensive tackle in the first 2 days of the draft this year, but it might impact if you either literally or metaphorically re-sign Jerry Tillery. You know what I mean? Like, if you say, hey, this is gonna be a guy in the rotation, but again, you're judging the first 73 injury-riddled snaps of his NFL career before a serious knee injury, so I don't know how fruitful that will be, but I'm curious.
I've reviewed based off less, so that'll probably be an
That's
entirely
true.
separate one, because at least
Fair,
it's
okay.
in multiple games, so it gives us an opportunity to see him against different opponents and just kind of see how he's moving a little bit. And so that I think will be worth reviewing.
5 games.
Gelati has a much larger sample size, which will be good. And that's the thing, though. Like, they can't. The reason that's so important is, like, if what their plan is next year is, Gelati and Norman Lott will take a big step forward. It's like, that's not a plan. That's a wish. And that's running back the pass rush when you've asked Chris Jones. Chris Jones has had to be superhuman for the pass rush to be okay for years. And that's just not the best thing you can do in the modern NFL is, and really for years and years and years, but especially now, even with running the running game taking a little more importance now, be able to get home with 4. And that allows you, like, you look at Houston right now, and Houston's got an insane defense on multiple levels, but they're a great example of talent trumping scheme. And Ryans is a good defensive coach, but they don't disguise anything.
The stats play that out. I don't know if we talked about it on this show, but Houston is at the very top in terms of defensive homogeny, and the Chiefs are at the top in terms of defensive variety.
Right. And that's a good way to see that it really does matter who you play. And it really does matter who you have on the field. And some of that's a talent thing. Maybe that's a Veach thing. But when there were talented players that were put in a bad position, because Shamari Connor is a talented player, but he was put in a position where he didn't succeed at his best. Like that, those things, it just makes you wonder a little bit in terms of the chemistry between what the front office is grabbing and what the coaching's doing. So that was, but the pass rush one, along with some of the rotating stuff in the secondary, really bummed me out this year, because I think it's borderline inexplicable in a room where someone is allowed to say, yeah, but it's not working and it hasn't worked. So stop saying this is why when it doesn't work.
Well, look, this is officially an episode of Only Weird Games because we've rolled over the hour mark, and we did, Seth, believe it or not, we did check off all of these specific defensive topics I wanted to talk to you about here today. I have two sort of, I don't know, in the margins topics that I thought we'd get to if by any means, by some shocking turn of events, we needed to fill a little more time today. But I'm gonna go ahead and put those right back into the in the old pocket for Thursday's show. We'll continue to kind of expand on this. We got a lot more time than usual because we're not talking about playoff games. We're talking about what we learned from the regular season. So we will do more of that on Thursday. Of course, if there's any news on the coordinator front, you can see it across KCSN socials, and we'll talk about it on Thursday's show as well. But that's a podcast, Seth, and because Nate's not here, you have to get us out of here. And if I could put a restrictor plate on anything evangelical or anything related to serious life lessons, man, I'd love a silly one.
Nothing evangelical. Well,
I feel like you've hit your mark today. I feel like you've saved enough souls already.
You know,
we'll talk to you on Thursday. Bye, everybody.
Sometimes things can flourish most